Well, it's the 15th of October. It's a brisk day in Michigan, and I'm about to cut down my plants today, as it's going to be about freezing this evening in Michigan. I guess what we're going to call this today is the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and the secret globalist history you're not supposed to understand. So I'm basically going to provide an extemporaneous framework for understanding the last 230 years of American history. Before I get started, though, I had a little housekeeping I wanted to do. Facebook has been censoring me for 30 days, up until after the election, of course, which is about 2.5 weeks away. If you can, please go to my group. I'll have that in the notes. If you click Show More and send this to my group, because I can't post to my own group. I can't communicate with my own group. So I'd really appreciate it if somebody could post it to me. I'll provide that link. The second item is that, while the choice between Trump and Biden is kind of that of choosing a hot plate of poop and a cold cup of diarrhea, I think we really have to get Trump back in office, because if we don't, Biden and Harris and AOC and the rest of them are going to push the green agenda, which is basically Agenda 21, down the throats of the American people, and this country will never be the same. I also found out that I can attend my city council meetings online. I didn't know that until this week. Everybody's locked down, of course. So I'm encouraging people throughout the world to go to their local city council meetings and lay out the globalist agenda, lay out our demands, and I'll also put that out there as well, the demands, so you can just read them before the city council if you want. And those demands would be no 5G, no smart meters, no geoengineering, no forced vaccinations, no contact tracing, no more big tech censorship of anti-globalists that support this agenda, a universal right to grow cannabis and perhaps psilocybin as well worldwide, no water fluoridation, no GMOs, farming or Roundup use, no digital currency, arrest and prosecute and seize the financial assets of Bill Gates and George Soros. That's a short list. Arrest Elon Musk for putting 40,000 5G satellites into orbit around our planet. So I'll put those out. If you just go to your city council and just, run these by, because the fact of the matter is, and I've told my city council this, I said, I understand you can't represent us, but you can start attending our protests and our teach-ins and things like that. Because if you don't, the only thing we can really take away is that you're just a bunch of globalists, So, well, let's get on to this discussion, this secret history of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. And I'm just providing like a framework, and this is extemporaneous. I would like to do something more extensive, but for now. So let's start back around 1776. At that time, George Washington was made aware of a group called the Illuminati. Now, the Illuminati had been financed by the Rothschilds, so the family goes back at least that far. And, of course, Washington was a 33-degree Mason. I always thought him as a good Mason on the whole, none of us are perfect. But the point is, we were aware of both the Illuminati and the Rothschilds as far back as the late 1700s. So then, in the early 1800s, the Rothschilds started financing the Rockefeller family, who started out selling medicines, kind of like the character in the Wizard of Oz, you know, going town to town. That's really how the Rockefellers started out. Then by the mid-1800s, you know, they were getting into private-public partnerships to build the railroads, to influence Big Pharma, to control the American Medical Association. And all that had been done probably before 1900. Then in the early 1900s, 1913, the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and robber barons were responsible for the establishment of the Federal Reserve Bank, which is a central bank. And now just about every country in the world has a central bank, one way or another, controlled by the Rothschild family. I'm going to move this before it falls down again. So that was 1913. Now since 1913, because we've allowed the Federal Reserve, which is it's not federal and it's not a reserve, it's privately owned. And so by now the Rothschilds were beginning to control just about everything. You know, they now controlled the printing of our money. So in 1913, when it began, a dollar would buy $1's worth of goods. Today it will buy about 3 cents of goods. And so that's one of the ways they've robbed us over the last 107 years. They just keep printing money. It goes to the big corporations and the banks, and the value of our money continues to diminish. The next thing that happened was around 1920, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the robber barons decided to buy up all the banks, to buy up all the newspapers like the New York Times, so that they could control the message and take care of any dissent. So that was 1920. Then the next things that happened that led up to the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, as you see, you know, it turns out that cannabis was a threat to both big oil and big pharma. It was a threat to big oil because Henry Ford, I live in Dearborn, Henry Ford wanted to fuel his Model Ts with ethanol from hemp biomass, which is one of the most efficient growing biomasses on the planet. And it was also a threat to big pharma, and because they were making synthetic drugs from petrochemicals as well, and they were pushing the homeopaths and Ayurvedic medicine and things like that by the wayside. And the point being in all this is that the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and you know, I'm oversimplifying this, there are many, many more corporations and rich families involved, but basically they wanted to control the population, they wanted to control the corporations, and they wanted to benefit from this. So over the next many years, starting in '89, I started working towards the legalization of cannabis or marijuana. I work with some of the greatest people in the movement. I work with Jack Hare, I work with Gatewood Galbraith, and many others. And of course in 2001, my friend Tom Crossland was murdered at Rainbow Farm about a week before 9/11 occurred. And so, you know, a lot of us take for granted that, you know, marijuana is not a big deal, but I mean, the state was willing to kill people just for merely trying to promote what I've been trying to promote for many, many decades, which is just the right to grow your own herbs, including cannabis. And, you know, I would also like to see psilocybin legalized for personal growing and personal use. So anyway, about that same time, about 1990, I was a systems analyst at Ford Hospital in Detroit. I was getting a little bored, and I wanted to be head of the drug policy organization, which was funded by George Soros. And I didn't really know much about George Soros at the time, but I didn't get the job with the Drug Policy Alliance. But that was 1990. And then after that, I started what eventually became the Global Marijuana March. So as an activist, I probably launched the first global protest to legalize marijuana. And the last year I did this was 1996, same year California legalized marijuana. And at that point I had 60 demonstrations across the world. Then Dana Beal from the Yippies picked it up around 2000. And by 2018 there were 800 demonstrations around the world pushing for legalization. In Michigan, we got the right to grow outside in 2018, which is, you know, what you see here. And I don't know why more people don't do it, because I probably get my weed for 10 cents a gram at the very most. So so the point so far is that the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds over 200 years, 230 years, have really controlled everything, you know. In doing this today, they control most of the big Fortune 500 companies. They control the military-industrial complex. They control the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, you know, the United Nations. Well, again, the United Nations, so we go back to around 1945, sorry, right after the Second World War. They founded and financed the United Nations, and by 68, they were pushing climate change. They knew climate change was a farce, but they saw it as a means to control the world's wealth and population. So that takes us to 68. Around 2008, we saw the first global rollout of any technology, and that technology was smart meters. Again, the Rockefellers and Rothschilds were very much behind it. They started out with electronic smart meters, and like in Dearborn, where I am now, they're trying to put smart water meters on all our homes. The second global rollout was 5G, and that began occurring around 2019. I would have you watch my 40-minute presentation on 5G, a threat to our health, freedom, and liberty. That's well worth a watch. But the point is, 2008 with the smart meters, I think, was the first time you saw a simultaneous rollout of a technology throughout the world. Now, the only way this happens is if you have global control of institutions, you know. So by 2008, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers pretty much had control of all the world's institutions. And so now, we come up to 2019, they start rolling out the 5G. The FCC emasculates all local governments, so they have absolutely no control over the installation of these antennas all over the place. And if you read my essays, you'll see I go into great depth why this is a bad idea. So that's 2018. Then we come to the COVID epidemic starting in Wuhan, China. And even before that, Bill Gates with Event 2001 is predicting this virus. Actually, before that, in 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation did a paper talking about lockstep. And I should point out here, I've written a lot about this. Waddell, sociologist, has a term, flexion. So at the top, and I'm obviously simplifying this, at the top you've got the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. But over the years they've gotten what I call flexions. And these are people that operate at all levels of government. And wait for this plane to go over. They work in all levels of government, and they basically get their working orders from the Rothschilds. All these people I'm about to mention are globalists, they're technocrats, they're eugenicists, and they're all in lockstep with what's going on. So these are what I call flexions. So some of the people I would identify as flexions would be Henry Kissinger is obvious, Bill Gates is obvious, George Soros is obvious. And then, you've got the heads of all the tech companies like Zuckerberg with Facebook. He's a globalist flexion. And they're all pushing this globalist agenda. I mean, we've just seen yesterday where they even censored the White House's press secretary for bringing out an article showing the corruption of Biden. There's actually a much more damning release that's come out by this guy named Parrott, who was he controlled the Falcons that were used by Al-Qaeda, and he did this for 20 years. And he's just disclosed that Biden may have been responsible for the murder of SEAL Team 6 after they supposedly killed bin Laden, because apparently they didn't really kill bin Laden. So anyway, so far, we've got the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, pretty much at the top, and of course there are others. And then, now we have these flexions, which I've identified, like Gates and, Bezos and Soros, and, there's really quite a list. I'm just mentioning a couple of them. And they're all in lockstep with this globalist agenda, and that's kind of where we are, today. Now, the thing that's should scare everybody is, now they're trying to, force vaccinate us. They're trying to push contact tracing, which is just massive surveillance. I mean, if we didn't have enough already. And they were responsible for this lockdown, which has cost the United States already between $2 and $6 trillion. Now, the total funding of Social Security now is about $3 trillion, just to put that in perspective. $1 trillion is an astronomical amount of money, and many of us, including me, are very worried that this could eventually send us into a depression in the coming years. So, the relevance of cannabis is very important, because that's why I spent 30 years trying to help legalize it, was because even in '68, when I was 14 and did LSD and cannabis for the first time, I could never understand why cannabis was seen as such a problem. It wasn't until years later that I began to understand that, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers wanted illegal because it was a threat to their big pharma monopoly and their big oil monopoly. So what's going on right now is they're trying to usher in the fourth industrial revolution, which the backbone of this is 5G, and it's going to connect everything and everybody. In other words, it's going to control everything and everybody. And fortunately, what's been going on, like August 29th and October 26th, we're beginning to see these big global protests, you know. We saw a big one in London where David Icke spoke on August 29th. We saw another one in Berlin, Germany, where Robert Kennedy Jr. spoke. And as I predicted with the first global Stop 5G protest in January 25th, 2020, I said I thought it was necessary for us to get beyond 5G and adopt a set of planks that would completely destroy this globalist agenda and this globalist control. So that's kind of where we are right now. I'll just finish this by saying thanks to all those that liked my music video the other week, where I played my rendition of Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell and my own song Love Will Find a Way. I'm not much of a musician anymore, but I still like playing. So anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there for today. Hopefully I will be back after the election on Facebook. I should also mention that Facebook has shadow banned many of my essays. I have written literally books worth of essays over the last 10 years. They've shadow banned some. They've actually deleted 2 of them. And then YouTube also has deleted 2 of my recent videos. So, you know, we really have to step it up. That's why I'm telling you to go to your city council meetings. I mean, we can't allow ourselves to be silenced, you know, and probably the best way is to act locally. And as I've been saying since January, I'm encouraging all protests, whether it's the Stop the Lockdown protest or the Stop 5G protests or whatever, to enumerate these demands, you know, all of them, so we become unified. It's like I say, global movements are not my first rodeo, and I think I know what makes them effective, and I think that might explain why I'm getting censored so much by the big tech platforms. But anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there. Like I said, I've just given you this basic framework. I'm not trying to tell you I've given you this extensive, exhaustive history of the globalists and their agenda, but I think I've given you a good place to start. I would just recommend, you know, if you start doing your research, I would do a wiki search. I would look at the wiki article on the Rothschilds. I would look at the wiki article on the Rockefellers, and then from there, you know, you need to do a lot of research. But even what wiki admits about the Rothschilds is just stunning. I mean, they're certainly the most powerful family on planet Earth, and now they're trying to push forward a new global one-world government through their control of the UN and the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum and many other groups such as this. It's really time for humans to stand up, because I promised my wife I wasn't going to do anything after I helped legalize marijuana, but then I started getting into 5G, then I started realizing what was really going on, and I just could not in good conscience stand by. So that's kind of where we are today. I think I'll leave it there. And like I say, I'll remind you again, if somebody could post this video to my group so that they know I'm alive and well and know what's happened to me, I would certainly appreciate that. And we'll call it a day. So after this, these babies are coming down. In a couple of weeks, I'll probably have enough to supply me for the next year or so. So there we go. Have a good day. It was Bruce Cain, over and out. How do we start?